Here we have a pretty complex system of a robotic simulation that's interfaced with physical PLC hardware. So we've got Robot Studio here, which is a robotic simulation software, and a custom program. This program has these two robots tracing the outer perimeter of this sheet metal as it moves along the conveyor belt, and then the second robot will be picking up the sheet metal and placing it on this pallet. Now the goal here is to handle inputs through a PLC and communicate those inputs to Robot Studio so that the simulation reacts in real time to the PLC's variables and inputs. Here's a system overview. Got the PLC at the center of everything. It's connected to the HMI that we can see right here. This will indicate which mode it's in, whether manual, automatically move the conveyor belt, or e-stop, which resets the simulation. Also, if it's in hand mode, the user can push this button to move the conveyor manually. This is all connected to a SCADA system, which just monitors those four inputs. So we've got the, in auto, in hand, which it's in currently, e-stop, and move conveyor. And then the tricky part is to get Robot Studio to communicate with the PLC, we first have to send a MODBUS TCP message, or use a TCP client rather, within this software called Aviva Edge. Aviva Edge allows us to communicate via MODBUS TCP, and then we can communicate that MODBUS information to what's called an OPC UA server, also under Aviva Edge. So it's running both of these at the same time, communicating these variables to these variables. And then the OPC UA client within Robot Studio, which is a smart component, is able to see those variables as they change. Alright, we got the overview out of the way. I'm going to start our SCADA server real quick. So we'll start the SCADA server, and then we'll start the main Python program, which is using PyModBus to communicate various things to the SCADA. Alright, we've spun up here. We'll minimize that. Now we'll see that the SCADA has appropriately changed these values to indicate the current status. This is what we're controlling it with, this little toggle here. We've got our e-stop up top, and we've got this toggle. So clicking it here will bring it to in-hand mode. We see that reflected in Robot Studio and Aviva Edge, and it's indicated here on the Robot Studio HMI. We'll also look at auto mode, and then we'll test out the e-stop to see if it actually stops the simulation. So let us spin up Robot Studio here, get it to the start position. Now, the simulation is currently running, and the conveyor belt is not moving. That's because the toggle is in the neutral state, and it's not allowing the conveyor belt to move automatically or manually, and the e-stop is not pressed in. Now, when I turn it into, let's see. Okay, we're in auto mode, and the robot system will go on performing its functions as I talked about earlier. We'll click it to neutral, and the conveyor belt has stopped, but the first robot is continuing its action, and it's updating its position relative to the sheet metal automatically. Next we'll go into, let's see here, actually we'll do hand mode. Looks like that robot was ready for something. So we're in hand mode now, so that means when I press this button, we expect the conveyor belt to move as long as I have it held down. And there we are, the sheet metal has started to move, and just as before, it's completing the movement. If I stop holding the button, the robots will continue the task they were originally starting, and then they'll move back to their home and ready position. So let's test our very important e-stop by putting it in auto mode and then pressing the e-stop button now. So that shut down the entire simulation. Realistically, this would shut down each individual robot and the conveyor belt, and then things could potentially start back up by releasing the e-stop and pressing some input. But that's what we have here. One final thing I want to point out in the SCADA is if we take a look at the data table, oh actually we're in data table, we'll take a look at the graph. Try not to exit out of this. We can choose which variable we want to see the history of. So for example, e-stop, we can see when it was pressed. Now these just have dates, but on the back end of things, we also have the hour, minute, and second that these were activated. So we could go back and diagnose problems or see what was happening. We also have in hand here, we can see when we manually put it in hand mode and when we pressed the button, the move conveyor button, when in hand mode was active. And I think that just about does it. Yeah, our server, client, perfect.